Tonight on IBN News, the Middle East in revolt. Tensions continue to rise in the Middle East as thousands seek to topple their own administrations, citing that crooked government policies, illegitimate wars, and abuses are to blame. In this segment, we'll look at what is currently taking place in the Middle East, what the mentality is behind these uprisings, and how some are saying that prophecy is unfolding right before our very eyes.
The Arab Spring, literally the Arab Rebellions or the Arab Revolutions, is a revolutionary wave of demonstrations and protests occurring in the Arab world. Since the 18th of December 2010, there have been more than 20 different uprisings in not only the Middle East, but North Africa as well.
After decades of living under dictatorship and absolute monarchies, the people of the Arab world are rising up with anti-government protests. This historic upheaval began in Tunisia and rapidly spread across the vital region. IBN News correspondent Tina Wallace has our coverage of this event.
It all began on the streets of Tunisia, a simple man trying to make a simple living. He wanted to sell bees, but was denied the very license needed to sell on the streets of Tunisia. Mohamed Bouazizi suffered humiliation in an attempt to provide for his own family and could take no more. Standing in front of the provincial headquarters, he doused himself with a flammable liquid and set himself ablaze. Public outrage quickly grew following this incident of self-immolation. A campaign of civil resistance, including a series of increasingly violent street demonstrations, ultimately led to the ousting of longtime President Ben Ali in January 2011, and later Prime Minister Mohamed Ghannouchi in February 2011. The demonstrations, infiltrated by corruption, food inflation, poor living conditions, and other forms of political freedom, resulted in scores of deaths and injuries, most of which were the result of action by police and security forces against demonstrators. Street demonstrations and unrest have continued to the present day.
The largest, most organized demonstrations have often occurred on a day of rage, usually Friday, afternoon prayers. The protests have also triggered similar unrest outside the region.
With the success of the protests in Tunisia, a wave of unrest struck Algeria, Jordan, Egypt, and Yemen, then spread to other countries where most have suffered severe losses, including countless injuries and death. IBN News correspondent has our coverage of this event.
Protests, violence. The area around the great river Euphrates is boiling. Tens of thousands protested on the streets of Egypt's major cities, while the Egyptian government attempted, somewhat successfully, to eliminate the nation's internet access in order to inhibit the protesters' ability to organize through social media. There were also huge rallies in Libya, where a civil war began in mid-February when opposing forces controlled most of Benghazi, the country's second largest city. 5 days later, protests had spread to the capital of Tripoli. Rebel forces have since then taken control of various cities, including the capital city. The rising death toll, which currently numbers in the thousands, drew international condemnation, resulting in the resignation of several Libyan diplomats and their call for the regime's dismantlement. Meanwhile, the Syrian and Yemeni uprising have intensified and have created violence and mass casualties. On July 31st, Syrian army tanks stormed several cities where at least 136 people were killed in one of the most violent and bloody days since the uprising started. Anti-government protests turned violent in Yemen when President Ali Abdullah Saleh was injured in an attack on a mosque in his compound in the Yemeni capital, Sana'a, causing him and 35 members of his family, the Prime Minister, and the Speaker of the Yemeni Parliament to flee for Saudi Arabia. For IBN News, I'm Amy Sullivan.
In spite of all the efforts for peace, the wars and protests continue to rage on. In order to find a real resolution, we may have to take a deeper look at what causes people to turn on each other in such violent ways. For possible insight to the cause of this behavior, IBN News went on location to consult with researcher Joanne Lane for facts on this subject. I'm Kim Kaziaka with IBN News, and joining us now we have researcher Joanne Lane. Joanne, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me on your program.
Yes. Joanne, can you tell us a little bit about the type of research that you do?
Yes, we do right now, especially the historical research, which of course is like history of the world, the cultures, the customs of people, and how they relate to one another. Then we have the scientific research, which is knowledge and facts and proven theories of DNA, genetics, and how a person becomes who they are. And third, I would say the human psyche, which is the motivating force of a person, and that can be influences or motivations in many different ways.
Wow, that sounds very interesting and very extensive in the different types of research that you do.
Oh yes, it's very interesting, very interesting.
Can you tell us a little bit about the mindset of the people that you see that seem to be causing this wave of revolts in place after place?
Well, there certainly is a whirlwind of emotions that are going on over there. It's very sad. And yet, at the same time, there's quite a revolt, is the word that you used, and a wave of just flowing over the people and causing them to want to rebel against this authority. I would call it maybe an insurrection, which would be basically an unorganized. But in this case, it does tend to be organized. There is a thread of something that is causing the people to just go from, as you said, place after place, and to try to bring down these leaders that are in this authority.
Yes, it seems to be spreading. It's like sparks that just keep igniting fire after fire.
Oh, definitely.
And the peace just doesn't seem... Yes. Can you tell us maybe some of the case studies where you have seen this type of behavior exhibited?
Yes, one of the biggest examples that we have seen is in the Crusades.
The Crusades?
Where back in 325 BCE, that fear and intimidation, threats, and brutality were used to force the people into compliance. Back in the days of Constantine, that is, a lot of these things did get started at that time. And there are also modern day crusades that are going on in our society as well. That this type of behavior that really does begin as a group or as an individual.
And can you tell me, do you see a connection with this type of behavior that we just talked about and the mentality of the citizens who are participating, involved in all these revolts and uprisings?
Well, again, I have a book that is titled The End. And the author, Israel Hawkins, has a quote in there that I thought was just very profound. It said, the definition of war is, it is man's way of destroying an enemy that he created in the first place.
That is very profound.
Yes, it is.
Yes. So what other contributing factors do we have?
We do need more character training to teach moral excellence, learning acceptance, learning respect, self-control, responsibility, and basic just character development.
Yes, those all sound like some really wonderful things too, that if practiced, that we would have peace in the world.
Oh, we really would. It's a proven fact that these things will bring a peaceful existence.
Wow, Joanne, that is so interesting. And thank you so much for sharing all that with us. That was very informative.
Oh, I enjoyed it too. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
As NATO bombings continue, wars are waged and civilians revolt. But do the Holy Scriptures predict these events in this time period? What do they mean?
According to Israel Hawkins and the House of Yahweh, these wars that are being waged in the vital region is spoken of in Revelations chapter 9, 16, and 17, which tells of a trouble starting in and around the great river Euphrates. It states that this trouble will eventually lead to 4/5 of the Earth's population being wiped out, showing these uprisings are no coincidence.
And if you do have any questions or would like more information on this topic, please call the number on your screen to learn more on what these uprisings mean in prophecy. And that's our broadcast for this evening. On behalf of Kim Kaziaka and the entire IBN News team, I'm Charity Heimerman. Thanks for watching IBN News, the world's only true news source.